that a Jewish fetus achieves full human rights only after he has received his MD degree or a membership card to the Shonman Society. While we're on the subject of medicine, there's a story told about Irving, who was wheeling himself in his wheelchair frantically down the corridor of the hospital just prior to his operation. And the nurse stopped him and said, "What's the matter, Irving?" And he said, "The nurse said that this is a very easy operation, it's very simple, and everything is going to turn out all right." She replied, "The nurse was only trying to comfort you. Why are you so frightened?" And he replied, "She wasn't speaking to me, she was talking to the doctor." Well, in any event, doctors may find themselves from time to time daunted by a particular operation. But no operation is too big or too complex that it can't be handled by the men and women of the New York City Police Department with great skill, dispatch, and equity. All of us are very proud to be a part of and to work with the greatest law enforcement agency in the world, the New York City Police Department. And we are very privileged to have at the helm of this police department the greatest police commissioner in the world, the Honorable Ray Kelly. You know, friends, Dr. James Conant, who's a former president of Harvard University, always kept a model of a turtle on his desk because it reminded him that a turtle can only move forward when it sticks its neck out. There's actually a human analogy to this, and that is that progress can only be made when someone is willing to stick his neck out. Commissioner Kelly, all of us are in your debt because you're constantly sticking your neck out in behalf of all of us to make this the greatest city in the world. You know, Zucchini, the hero of Tea House of the August Moon, said that adversity makes a man think, thought makes a man wise, and wisdom makes the world more endurable. Well, the problems and challenges of policing New York City certainly have stimulated the thought of Commissioner Kelly, and his thoughts have generated a tremendous body of police science wisdom. And the result of all that is that we have made out of New York City the greatest and safest large center of population in this country and in the world. And all of us are privileged to be part of it and to be citizens in it. And I know that a very important component in all of this is the partnership that exists between the leadership of the Jewish community and the leadership of the NYPD. These relationships are extraordinarily important. First of all, we need other people just to know who we are. Nobody can be a real person by himself. We are defined not by what we believe, but by our interconnectedness. You know that individualism is an important part of the credo of this nation. The right of every person to be born and to determine exactly the way he wants to go in this world. But individualism goes awry when it posits the notion that we're just solitary pilgrims. We have the right to meet people, to use people, to be helped or hurt by people, but essentially we're told you're on your own. Nothing could be further from the truth. Most of the plagues of modern society, including the breakdown of the family, violent crime, white-collar crime, all of these elements, as well as the notion that you can take from government and you don't have to give back, all of these are the products of the belief that we only have to take care of ourselves. I don't have to worry about you, and I don't expect you to worry about me. There's nothing further from the philosophy of Yiddishkeit, of the essential principles and practices of Judaism. We believe in tzedakah, we believe in gemilut chasadim, constantly doing for one another. That's what police service is all about. That's the essence of 1013. 1013 means we're worried about one another. I'm concerned about you, and I know that you are concerned about me. And that's what makes a successful relationship. You know, meeting as we are this year, so close to 9/11, this event inevitably brings to mind the losses that we sustained on that occasion and the police officers that we lose throughout the year, every year. But the essential message of our religious faith is that death and pain and loss are only chapter 1. We don't believe that life is a Shakespearean or Greek tragedy. We don't believe that reality is the same as Romeo and Juliet, which ends in death, misery, and disaster. We can handle what comes our way. Not everything is always rosy. As Tevye says in Fiddler on the Roof, one day it's honey and raisin cake, and the next day it's a stomachache. But we can handle what comes our way because of our connectedness with each other. In the 23rd Psalm it says, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're not supposed to dwell in that shadow, you're supposed to walk through it. Sometimes you think you're going to trip because of the mud created by our tears. But our partnership gives us the confidence that we'll be able to transform tragedy into hope. And so as we get together to usher in this new year, and we realize there are so many multitudes of individuals out there who worship the golden calf of individual fulfillment and can only ask, what's in it for me? I pray that the joint efforts of the leadership of New York City's Jewish community and the men and women of the New York City Police Department will continue to bring blessing, holiness, and meaning into this world in which our children and our children's children will live for many years to come. May 5773 bring added life to your years and added years to your life. A happy New Year.
Mr. Police Commissioner of the City of New York. Now we're Raymond W. Kelly.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Police Headquarters in Shanatoga. And Rabbi Cass, thank you for the very kind remarks about myself and the department. I certainly want to thank all of our religious and community leaders for being here this morning, including our guest speaker, Rabbi Michael Miller of the Jewish Community Relations Council, and his sidekick, David Pollack, is here as well. Thank you for being here. I'm going to have more to say about Michael in just a moment. But for now, I want to note that Rabbi Miller and the JCRC have been terrific supporters of this police department's High Holy Day briefings from the very beginning. So we look forward to Rabbi Miller's remarks. Now, in everything we do as a police department, as Rabbi Cass said, we rely on our partnership with the community to fight crime and to keep this city safe. We saw another great example of that cooperation last week with the arrest of a 25-year-old man charged with stealing a highly valuable menorah from a private residence in Midwood. The theft took place at about 10:30 on the night of August 21st at the home of a rabbi, the burqa, who wore a yarmulke, a white shirt, and black pants to blend into the Orthodox Jewish community, was captured on surveillance video, entering the rabbi's home through the back door and leaving with the menorah. Based on a tip from a member of the community, detectives from the 66th Precinct Detective Squad apprehended the suspect, located the menorah, and returned it to the rabbi. The suspect confessed to the crime and to several other burglaries in the area, including one in which she stole a Torah scroll and a silver case. Crimes like these remind us of the added vigilance needed during the religious holy days, when synagogues and homes can be more vulnerable. For that reason, the department will take our usual precautions to protect neighborhoods and places of worship during the coming weeks. We'll deploy additional resources to precincts with large Jewish communities to ensure that coverage is more than adequate in these areas. That includes increasing the number of foot patrols, supplementing patrols with designated house of worship cars, and expanding community outreach. Some synagogues may receive unannounced visits from our Hercules teams. These are specially trained, heavily armed officers whose job it is to deter terrorists and disrupt any reconnaissance that they may be engaged in. Once again, I want to ask for your cooperation in our efforts to protect the city. If you see anything of a suspicious nature, notify the department. How do you do that? You do it by calling 311. Obviously, it's a crime in progress, you call 911. When you see anything of a suspicious nature, call 311. We have several hotlines. They'll put you in contact with the proper hotline. Now, the department is constantly monitoring events overseas and assessing potential threats to New York City. Of late, we've been looking closely at the actions of Iran and its proxy Hezbollah. Worldwide, we've seen a sharp increase in operational tempo and a willingness to conduct terrorist attacks targeting Israeli interests and international Jewish communities. So far this calendar year, there have been 9 plots against Jewish targets globally, to include those in New Delhi, Tbilisi, Baku, Mombasa, Cyprus, Bulgaria, and Bangkok. While none of our current intelligence points to specific threats against Jewish targets here in New York City, we're constantly aware of the need to maintain our guard. With that in mind, we're going to provide you with a detailed briefing on Iran and Hezbollah by the department's Director of Intelligence Analysis, Rebecca Weiner. Rebecca oversees the work of all of the uniformed and civilian analysts assigned to the Intelligence Division's Analysis Unit, the Cyber Unit, and the Analytical Programs Unit. She also serves as Principal Advisor to our Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence, David Cohen, who's here with us this morning. Now, Director Weiner brings exceptional credentials to her role. She joined the department in 2006 as an intelligence research specialist, focusing on homegrown radicalization and extremism. As legal counsel to the Intelligence Analysis Unit, she provided guidance and direction on counterterrorism investigations to ensure that they meet the strictest constitutional standards. At the same time, she served as the Middle East, North Africa team leader, tracking events in that region and potential threats to New York City. In March 2010, Director Weiner became the first representative of local law enforcement to serve on the National Intelligence Council in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the department, she served as an international security fellow at Harvard University's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. She's also worked as a biotechnology consultant at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and as a research associate at the Council on Foreign Relations. Director Weiner holds a bachelor's degree from Harvard University, a law degree from Harvard Law School. So please join me now in welcoming the department's Director of Intelligence Analysis, Rebecca Weiner.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today. As the Commissioner mentioned, I'm going to be speaking to you today about what we view as a marked uptick in operational tempo against Israeli and Jewish targets worldwide, which has been attributed to Iran and/or Hezbollah. Since the beginning of the year, we've counted a total of 9 incidents targeting Israeli and Jewish targets, and most recent of which was the regrettable July 18th fatal bombing of a bus in Burgas, Bulgaria. These incidents are framed against the geopolitical backdrop of increased tensions between Israel and Iran over Iran's nuclear program and very real worries about the outbreak of hostilities in the region. It's through this lens that we view these incidents, which we've been studying closely for lessons that can be applied to New York City to better protect our public. Just a final note before we begin, this briefing is based on publicly available open source information. The first incident that I'm going to discuss this morning occurred on January 1st, 2012, when a suspicious package was found on a bus carrying Israeli tourists to a Bulgarian ski resort. This came on the heels of what intelligence officials deemed credible threats to Israelis traveling in Bulgaria, leading Bulgarian officials to increase security at ski resorts and hotels, particularly those popular with Israeli tourists, such as Bansko, pictured above. Some 10 days later, on January 12th, Thai police arrested Hussein Atras, a Lebanese individual carrying a Swedish passport, at the Bangkok airport. Atras comes from the southern Lebanese town of Hamatia, a known Hezbollah stronghold. His brother was allegedly involved in the Iranian killing of 4 Kurdish opposition leaders in 1992 in Germany. According to press reports, in the weeks prior to Atras's arrest, Israeli officials had passed intelligence to the Thai government warning about possible plotting in Thailand against locations including the Israeli embassy, synagogues, Israeli tour companies, and restaurants visited by Israelis. Thai authorities subsequently raided a 3-story commercial building linked to Atras, where they seized significant quantities of bomb-making precursor materials, including nearly 4,400 kilograms of urea-based fertilizer and 300 liters of ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate and urea are widely used fertilizers. When mixed with fuel, however, these components can also be used to construct bombs. 1 week following Atras's arrest, Azeri authorities detained 3 men on charges of planning to attack 2 Israelis employed at a Jewish school in Baku, a rabbi and a teacher. According to Azeri authorities, the 3 suspects had received weapons and explosives that were smuggled into Azerbaijan with the assistance of Iranian officials. Notably, press reports also stated that the killings were to be carried out by Azeri criminal elements who were provided with $150,000, plans of the school, and photos of the 2 potential targets. This is reminiscent of last fall's plot involving the Saudi ambassador, including the use of elements of drug cartels. The next 3 incidents took place over the span of 2 days in mid-February, and they appear to have been linked. The first of the 3 occurred at 8:30 a.m. on February 15th in Tbilisi, Georgia, when an employee of the Israeli embassy there, who served as the driver for the Israeli ambassador, discovered a magnetic bomb, a remote triggering device, under the driver's seat of his personal vehicle. Luckily, local security was able to successfully dismantle the device. The car was in an unsecured parking lot located approximately 200 meters from the Israeli embassy. Later that afternoon, in New Delhi, India, a magnetic bomb with a time-delayed or remote detonation triggering device was affixed to a van carrying the wife of the Israeli Defense Ministry attaché, who was on her way to pick up her 2 children from school. Approximately 40 seconds after it was attached to the car, the device exploded, injuring her, the driver of the van, and 2 bystanders. 4 Iranian nationals are suspected of involvement in the attack. 3 of the Iranian suspects fled to Iran, and the 4th was captured in connection with an incident that took place the following day in Bangkok, which I'll turn to momentarily. Interestingly, an Indian national who worked for the Iranian press is also suspected of having played a role in the plot, conducting pre-operational surveillance. This slide shows a picture of the vehicle moments after the explosion. The red circle designates where the magnetic device was placed. Here is the van after the fire was extinguished. Fortunately, both Corin and her driver were able to escape the vehicle due to the placement of the IED toward its rear. The next day, an explosion, which has been described in media reports as a work accident, occurred at this house in Bangkok, Thailand. Immediately following the explosion, 2 men were observed leaving the house, carrying backpacks and a portable radio, and entering a taxi. A 3rd man, who appeared wounded and disoriented, was also observed leaving the house and attempting to hail a taxi. When it wouldn't stop for him, he threw an explosive device that he was carrying at it. As he was approached by Thai police officers, he threw another explosive in their direction. This one bounced off of a truck, rebounded, and detonated in front of him, blowing off one leg and requiring the amputation of the other. Here you see stills of the three individuals who departed the house after the explosion. The individual in the middle was arrested at the Bangkok airport attempting to flee to Malaysia later that day. The individual on the left was arrested in Malaysia the following day. The individual on the right, seen carrying the two explosive devices, was taken into custody after sustaining severe injuries. This picture was taken days prior to the incident in a resort town near Bangkok by a woman who had been partying with the three suspects. Now, individuals associated with the Bangkok incident appear to have links to individuals associated with the Delhi incident as well as the disruption in Plaza, which I'll turn to next, suggesting some degree of coordination between the incidents despite their lack of geographic proximity. It should also be noted that the 3 February incidents occurred in close proximity to the anniversaries of the deaths of Hezbollah commander Imad Muniyah and former Hezbollah leader Sayyad Abbas Musawi. Moving forward in time to this past summer, and from Asia to Africa, the 7th incident dates to June 19th, when 2 individuals allegedly linked to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps were arrested in Kenya. Kenyan authorities also seized 15 kilograms of the military-grade plastic explosive RDX in connection with the arrests. The RDX was brought into Kenya aboard the MV Patrice, an Iranian-owned and operated vessel that has been reflagged, probably to avoid sanctions. According to press reports, police sources interviewed a driver that the men had hired, who stated that they had surveilled Israeli and Jewish targets in Nairobi. 3 weeks later, on July 7th, a 24-year-old male described as a Swedish passport holder of Lebanese descent was arrested in the resort town of Limassol, Cyprus. Reports said that he was scouting Israeli targets and tracking Israeli tourists, and that his arrest was based on a tip from foreign intelligence agencies. The suspect had arrived on July 5th, which coincided with the country's assumption of the presidency of the European Union, an event marked by the gathering of a host of EU officials and commissioners on the island. Finally, the most recent incident was also the most successful. On July 18th, a bus carrying Israeli tourists who had arrived on a charter flight from Tel Aviv exploded at the Burgas International Airport in Bulgaria. 7 people were killed in the attack, including the bomber, and more than 20 were injured. The bomber was stopped in the midst of placing the device in the luggage compartment of the bus, which you see before you. The device, which consisted of TNT with a walkie-talkie as a remote detonator, was likely triggered by the bomber's accomplice. The fact that he sought to place the bomb on the luggage rack suggests that while it was technically a suicide attack, it may not have been intended as such. The Burgas attack echoes back to the January threat stream against Israelis in Bulgaria. It also occurred on the 18th anniversary of the Iran-Hezbollah attack on the Amia Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina. To conclude, the major themes from looking at these 9 incidents are acceleration and diversity. While the Burgas attack was the one that made headlines, in our view, it was not an isolated event at all, but it was in fact part of a wave of plotting and bore the hallmarks of some of its predecessors. Not only have we seen more activity in a short period of time, but it's occurred over a wide range of locales, from the Mediterranean to Eastern Europe to Southeast Asia to Africa. Moreover, as you've seen, these incidents have varied widely in the modus operandi, in targets, and in the suspects involved. This presents a challenge to law enforcement efforts. However, with the marked exception of the Burgas attack, the plots have been largely foiled or failed and have not resulted in fatalities. We're cognizant that this increase in operational tempo against Israeli and Jewish targets overseas could have implications for New York City. And with this awareness comes vigilance and preparedness, especially during this holiday season. We wish you happy and healthy holidays.
Thank you, Rebecca. On June 29th, the Department of Homeland Security announced that it would allocate $10 million to nonprofit organizations nationwide. More than $3 million of that money will go to 43 Jewish institutions here in New York City. The Jewish Community Relations Council consulted and advised many of these groups, helping them to apply for the funding and making the case for eligibility. We're very fortunate to have as our guest speaker today the Executive Vice President and CEO of the JCRC, Michael Miller. In his 26 years in that role, Rabbi Miller has been a powerful advocate for the 60 Jewish organizations that make up the JCRC's umbrella. Rabbi Miller has helped them obtain important government grants, coordinate an effective unified response to crises both here and in Israel, and promote interfaith tolerance and understanding citywide. He is an honors graduate of Yeshiva University with bachelor's and master's degrees in Jewish history. Rabbi Miller began his career in Jewish communal service in 1976 as a U.S. Army chaplain in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and was awarded the Army Commendation Medal. He then accepted an appointment as spiritual leader of a congregation in Springfield, Massachusetts. Years later, after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, Rabbi Miller volunteered for service at Ground Zero and became a certified Red Cross chaplain. He also counseled the families of victims of American Airlines Flight 587 after it crashed in Queens later that year. Rabbi Miller has been a trusted advisor to many of the city's elected officials, including Mayor Bloomberg. He's also been an outstanding supporter of this police department's public safety mission. So please join me now in welcoming Rabbi Michael Miller.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Kelly. Thank Chief Banks as well for extending the invitation for me to be here today to share a few words with you. I'm deeply honored to be standing before you. And a thanks as well to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Cass, who, as always, has shared some very inspirational words with us today. Before I begin my remarks, with your indulgence, I want to make two personal comments. I first want to pay tribute to our own Sally Goodcove, who passed away a year ago. Sally's two great passions were the NYPD and the Jewish community. She spent over 30 years on the board of the New York City Police Foundation, helping to support the work of the NYPD, and she served as well on the JCRC board for many years, and as chair of our Commission on Jewish Security. She loved coming to this event and shepping nahas from seeing Commissioner Kelly, whom she adored, at this podium. Her presence is sorely missed, although I'm sure she's here in spirit. May her memory continue to be a blessing. This opportunity also has special meaning for me personally. My late grandfather, my mother's father, Samuel Goldman, who was born in the mid-1800s just a few blocks from here on Stanton Street, as an adult lived in Hartford, Connecticut. He was active in civic affairs and served for a period of time, yes, as the city's police commissioner. The first and possibly only police commissioner of a major city in the United States who was an Orthodox Jew. The family has always been proud of his role in law enforcement, and I trust that in the heavens, he's proud that his Anikel, his grandson, is speaking in the headquarters of the New York Police Department. In 2003, the JCRC honored Commissioner Kelly at our annual gala. To introduce the commissioner, we used the NYPD Heroes video that ended with James Earl Jones in his resonant voice describing the NYPD as heroes, always heroes. Without question, we of the New York Jewish community know exactly what we can expect from the NYPD. Heroes, always heroes. Now in our fourth decade, the JCRC has been privileged to work in partnership with the NYPD on behalf of the Jewish community. The role of partner applies to every one of us. We should be asking ourselves, how can we in the Jewish community help our heroes to protect us? How can we best hold up our end of the partnership? Decades ago, in the early days, that meant working with the NYPD and other advocates to help found the Bias Incident Investigating Unit, which Commissioner Kelly enhanced and renamed as the Hate Crimes Task Force. In the beginning, the Bias Unit, as it was then called, was commanded by Captain Paul Donnelly, who brought with him detectives from the Bronx Narcotics Squad. A young sergeant with promise, Joe Leake, was the XO. They were exceptional investigators, but sometimes sensitivity challenged. That didn't last very long. Partnering with the JCRC and other groups, the Bias Unit quickly became proficient in all aspects of their work. As a result of that partnership, the heroes of the Hate Crimes Task Force of the NYPD continue their core mission to send a clear message that hate crimes will not be tolerated in New York City. Police departments around the world have modeled their efforts on the pioneering, exemplary work of our heroes. It's easy to think that the NYPD can do anything, because that's often the case. But sometimes we can do things that NYPD cannot. In 1980, close to 200 Sifrei Torah scrolls were stolen. The police were frustrated because even if they did recover a stolen Torah, the owner could rarely provide positive identification of the stolen Torah scroll so that the thief could be prosecuted. In the words of some of the senior investigators at that time, those scrolls, they all look alike. Security measures are within the NYPD's expertise. Getting rabbinic authorities to agree on an issue is not. In response to a request from the NYPD, the JCRC, under the leadership of my late father, Zechron Livracha, of blessed memory, brought a broad spectrum of rabbinic authorities together with security experts to develop the Universal Torah Registry, which places an invisible to the naked eye, halachically permissible security code onto Torah scrolls. When the NYPD spread the word about the Universal Torah Registry, the theft stopped. The partnership between the Jewish community and the NYPD worked beyond anyone's expectations. There have been only a handful of Torah scrolls stolen since then. We learned about one a few moments ago, followed by arrests and long prison sentences for the thieves. What else can we do to be the kind of partners NYPD deserves today? Each and every one of us attending today is part of the solution. We're here. I may be preaching to the choir, but it's up to us to spread the word. Coming to one police plaza once or twice a year is just not enough. We all share an obligation to build a solid partnership between our institutions and organizations and our local precincts. Each precinct has a precinct council. Leaders of our institution should regularly attend. Contact your community affairs officer for more information. The Community Affairs Bureau regularly sends out informational emails about incidents, anti-crime tips, and more. They should have all of our email information. Subscribe for information from NYPD Shield, but don't be a passive subscriber. Those emails should not stop just with us. We should send them to our list and include the information in our newsletters to get the story, to get the word out. The leaders of our schools, congregations, and organizations should know their local precinct commanders and community affairs officers, and vice versa. You should tell them when services are being scheduled in your synagogues, how many people use your facility, when the kids will arrive for school and be dismissed, and about special events. With that kind of simple information, the NYPD can take steps to better protect us. Another suggestion for those in charge of buildings: schedule a visit to your facility and walk through it with them. Make the floor plans available to them in the event of an emergency, my friends. Those simple steps may be the difference between life and death. Some observers note that the Jewish community, and especially New York's Jewish community, is the most over-organized community in the world. Not only do we have organizations, we have organizations of organizations. I know this because I lead one of them. We know the Jewish community. We do. Our quirks, our rhythms, our key players. We can provide valuable guidance to the NYPD leadership at all levels. We should consistently be asking, how can I help? They know that we can and do help. When the heroes of our NYPD look at our community, they do so with admiration. Our organizations, ranging from the community-wide reach of the UJA Federation, the JCCs, the COJOs, to the remarkable responders, Hatzalah, Shomer, Shmir, Misaski, Chaver, etc., all regularly serving real people with real needs, and they do it well. When we play our roles appropriately, like when our civilian patrols are the eyes and ears of the NYPD, we help to make the NYPD more effective and our community even safer. Over the past year, a spate of articles have criticized and misrepresented the scope, purpose, and rationale behind many of the NYPD Intelligence Division's programs. They confuse events and policies in ways that are misleading and cast the tales they are telling in the worst possible light. Let there be no doubt. We are of the firm belief that the NYPD, under Commissioner Kelly's leadership, along with his top brass, have no hidden agenda. After 9/11, the department was understandably concerned that prohibitions in the guidelines might interfere with its ability to prevent terrorist attacks. As a result, in 2002, the NYPD proposed to a federal court that the terms of the guidelines be modified, and the court agreed. The modified guidelines begin by stating a general principle. Quote, in its efforts to anticipate or prevent unlawful activity, including terrorist acts, the NYPD must, at times, initiate investigations in advance of unlawful conduct. End quote. It goes without saying that no threat would justify the NYPD or the FBI operating in an unconstitutional manner. To date, however, no court has opined that they have. Indeed, there is true cause for concern and a need for a watchful eye, as we just heard from Director Weiner. New York City has been the target of 18 terrorist Plaza attacks since 1992, and 8 of those incidents involved Jews or Jewish targets, including plots to bomb synagogues in Riverdale and here in Manhattan. Zora Halberstam, I don't know if she's in the audience today, but she knows that all too well. She has 3 grandchildren named Ari in memory of their uncle, who in his 16th year of life was gunned down in a terror attack on the Brooklyn Bridge. As we've just heard, the NYPD believes Iranian Revolutionary Guards or their proxies have been involved so far this year in 9 plots against Israeli or Jewish targets around the world. As Iran dials up its rhetoric and threats to Israelis, Jews and Americans around the world, the protection provided by the NYPD is critical. And we're not in this alone. As the JCRC partners with the NYPD to protect the Jewish community, our Intergroup Relations Division has a long history of working with diverse New Yorkers of all races, ethnicities, and faiths, Catholics and Protestants, Buddhists and Muslims. The threat to our city impacts not all its residents, regardless of their culture and backgrounds. And so, we proudly stood with Mayor Bloomberg, Police Commissioner Kelly, and leaders of the Muslim community when the mosque in Queens recently was firebombed. And they all stood with us after arrests in the Riverdale and Manhattan synagogue bombing plots. The NYPD and JCRC uphold a fundamental truth that working in partnership, setting aside our differences, we can all build a stronger, more vibrant, and safer New York. Our partnership with the NYPD should be guided by the principle of Akara Satov, the ongoing recognition of the good done by our heroes, the men and women of the NYPD, and the NYPD exemplary leadership. And most importantly, the daily sacrifices made by them and their families. The Jewish community and all New Yorkers are deeply grateful to them. At this holiest time on our Jewish calendar and year-round, we pray for their success and their well-being. They are our heroes, always heroes. They are the NYPD. Thank you.